Clawdbot, Moltbot, OpenClaw. I'm hoping the name actually stays the same this week, but you know the thing I'm talking about, the open source AI assistant that's taken Silicon Valley by storm. But what can it actually do? Today, we're taking a deeper dive into all the amazing things it can do. I'm going to make sure that you're fully protected when you use it, and stay tuned to the end when I give you my honest opinion about whether you should even use OpenClaw. So let's start then by thinking about some use cases. What can OpenClaw actually do, and what can you use it for? I've curated some of these 3 great use cases that I've seen. Now let's start then with emails. Now the YouTuber Velvet Shark, he has a really good use case for email. So you can actually use OpenClaw for unsubscribing to all the junk emails you get sent. So doing this by hand obviously takes far too long. Delegating it to Clawdbot is a great use case. You can let it scan your emails as they come in, or you can run it on your past emails to delete, archive, or send them to a specific logins Gmail for this purpose. I actually have a logins Gmail that I use. But what about actually writing emails? Well, you probably don't want to let it write emails for you. As Velvet Shark points out in his video, LLMs are task orientated and they can follow up too aggressively sometimes with clients, and that can lead you in hot water. Check out what he got up to in his video. What about having it create you a morning brief? Well, this is a great use case. So since Clawdbot knows everything, you can ask it for a daily summary that collates information overnight specifically to you about topics you're interested in. It can give you a summary of coding tasks that it has completed overnight. Now, Greg Eisenberg had a really good video on this. He's actually sat down with founder Alex Finn to discuss that one. And it's the kind of thing that you would previously pay a personal assistant to compile for you. Now, remember, you could use Perplexity to compile the latest information. I, for instance, am interested in the new Harry Potter TV series, Boom, the supersonic aircraft, and when Waymo is going to arrive in the UK. So I get a weekly regular update from Perplexity about that, and that's something that OpenClaw can do for you as well, but you might not necessarily need to install that. A lot of these type of tasks you could also do with Claude Cowork for you as well. Now, probably the coolest thing about OpenClaw is the ability to interact with it from literally any tool you can think of. You can bring it into Slack, Telegram, and like any good VA, it will learn any of the tools that you give it access to. So you can see here that Matt Wolf is interacting with it in Slack to get it to return some AI news for him or to design his websites. Now the really cool thing is if you set this up in Telegram or WhatsApp, you can interact with it via voice notes. If you set it up with 11 Labs and then pass all of the responses through it, you could even get your morning brief in the voice of one of your favorite actors. Think Michael Caine or Morgan Freeman. Now, here is the important part. We at Gcore, of course, we've got your back when it comes to security. It wouldn't be a Gcore video unless we talked about security. OpenClaw might seem like a fun toy, and it is a lot of fun, but you have to make sure you're fully secure when you set this up, or it's going to lead you to some serious problems. And there are so many implications with OpenClaw, you really have to be on top of the security implications, especially if you're exposing any of your information from your corporate life whatsoever to it. So here are some of the top security concerns with OpenClaw, and crucially how you can mitigate those. Now remember that this list is by no means exhaustive, and there's always more you can do to be more secure. What you need to implement really depends on your use case. Let's go straight into it then, and note, first things is publicly exposed instances have been discovered through security scans with hundreds of Clawdbot gateways exposed to the internet. The Clawdbot gateway daemon defaults to port 818789. So if the configuration bind configuration is set to all or 0 instead of the default loopback, it can become accessible to anyone in the internet without a password or JWT authentication. Now, this is a nightmare because it means anyone can access not just your Clawdbot, but all of the tools and data you've connected to it. And remember, if you plugged in your API keys, then malicious actors could even run up a huge bill and burn through all of your tokens. And there are literally bots that scrape the internet 24/7 looking for exposed API keys to take advantage of this. So please don't get played. So what's the solution here? Well, the correct solution is to set up a firewall. We highly recommend using Gcore's virtual machines. A GPU is overkill here. What you want is a couple of vCPUs depending on your use case. Last week we actually recommended 8. Gcore has firewalls that could be set up through their virtual machines, and that means that only the IP of your machine, or IPs that you specifically request, can access the IP of your server. Here's the step-by-step of setting this up then. First, you want to create a custom firewall, so you want to navigate to Cloud, Networking Firewalls, and you want to create a firewall in the Gcore dashboard. You need to configure the inbound rules, so you want to add these rules in order of priority. SSH access, port 22, TCP. You want to use the template rule, SSH. Remember, SSH is the normal way of sort of porting onto a virtual machine or a GPU. And the source should be your static IP in CIDR format. And here's an example of that. Then you want to make sure we've got the Clawdbot gateway with the correct port. You want to select a custom rule. You want the protocol to be TCP. And you want the port to be either 18789 or your custom port if changed. And the source should be, as we said, your home office IP address in CIDR format. And this is critical. It never leaves the source blank. This would allow all IPs. Now, a really good option here is Tailscale as well. You might want to include that. And Clawdbot does actually give you the option of setting this up by default, even if you're running it locally on your machine as you're setting it up. Now you want to select custom rule. The protocol is UDP, the port is 14641, and the source you can leave this blank or specify Tailscale coordination server IPs. Now once you've set all of this up, you want to apply it to your virtual machine. So in the apply to instance dropdown, select your Clawdbot VM. You want to create the firewall, so clicking create firewall will activate all of those rules you've just set up immediately. And you want multiple IP whitelisting. So if you need to access Clawdbot from multiple locations, your home, your office, your mobile hotspot, you can set up custom rules for each of the IP addresses that you've assigned to it. You want to label each rule clearly, and you want to update the rules when the IP changes by networking, firewalls, menu, and then rules. Now, another security implication. How does OpenClaw actually store your data? Well, remember, it uses Markdown. Plain text or Markdown storage of sensitive data is one of those most critical vulnerabilities. So Clawdbot by default is going to store your complete conversation histories. That's your API keys, your Slack OAuth tokens, signal pairing, URLs, and even your Anthropic keys in plain text with no encryption. Now, generally, of course, when we make API calls, we want to make sure that our actual keys are stored in a database and they're not explicitly exposed in the call. Plain text storage issue is indeed one of Clawdbot's most serious vulnerabilities, and of course it is harder to resolve as it is at an architectural level. But here are some fixes. We want to restrict the file access to owner only using the chmod 600 command on all sensitive configuration files. So this prevents other machines and processes on the same machine from even reading your credentials. So we can kind of lock off your credentials. Remember, in some of the other tools we've talked about, there is a codex ignore file or a GitHub ignore file that you can execute to stop LLMs reading certain markdown files instead of reading everything. Or you can do what we would usually do when we're making API calls, and we can switch out our actual API keys for environment variables. And then instead of storing the credentials in OAuth, JSON, or environment files that persist on the disk, we can inject them at runtime. So here you go. Here is a list of your, perhaps how you would set this up. And what you would do is you would reference these in your config file using the $ with the variable name syntax. So the actual secrets never actually are touch the config file. And you can also implement the automatic key rotation for API keys and OAuth tokens as well. Now, third big problem, prompt injection. So what is this? Well, this is when Clawdbot can read everything, including your emails and messages. And a malicious actor can send you a message with a prompt whited out, and the LLM might pick it up and start acting on it. So what is the fix to this? How do you protect yourself from prompt injection? Well, one fix is to run OpenClaw on a sandbox or a container. Now, running Clawdbot directly on your host system is obviously a critical security mistake. When the AI executes commands or interacts with files, it does so with the same permissions as your user account. That's potentially accessing your SSH keys, browser passwords, financial documents, and system configurations. Containerization limits the blast radius, if you like, of any security incidents. And if Clawdbot gets tricked by a prompt injection attack into running malicious code, the damage stays contained within that Docker, and it cannot spread to your host system. So there you go. Those are three main security features to get started and how you can protect yourself from them. Obviously, there are more, and there's always more that you can do when it comes to security. But those are three things you can do off the bat to protect yourself. Now, let's talk about the bottom line. Is OpenClaw right for you? Well, the reality is this is a really fun project as we've seen, and there are lots of great use cases for recursive AI. But if you're a large enterprise looking for solutions, then there are a lot of steps you need to go through to make sure you are properly secure and locked down if you want to use Clawdbot. It's not that you can't use it, it's just we want to be fully secure if we are going to use it as an enterprise. And the reality is that that might not be the best option for you. Claude Co-work with MCP and Skills offers many of the same benefits as Clawdbot without some of the security headaches. And you could build your own bespoke open source tool with some of the open source models that's fully locked down on our infrastructure. Check out our video on how we built a legal RAG chatbot using GPT OSS. It was fully locked down on our GPUs, and that might actually be a better investment than just setting up Clawdbot on a virtual machine. I think the value in OpenClaw is that it has moved the conversation forward, and whilst there are lots of interesting use cases, I do think it's important that we don't lose sight of the security implications here. So what are your thoughts? Have you used OpenClaw? Did you find our security walkthrough helpful? And if so, please let us know in the comments. We'd love to know, and I will of course take the time to respond to every one of them. I will see you in the next video.